Surprise, OpenAI just dropped a new model, and it's not what you probably expect, especially when you see the name 4.1. Is that like worse than 4.5? What's the role of this model? It's a very interesting launch, especially when you see the blog post, which specifies in the API. It means they're not putting this on their website. Seems very strange. But hear me out, because this model's more relevant to you guys than almost any of the other ones we've talked about recently, because the focus is almost entirely on developers. There's a lot to be excited about here, from the larger context size, to the better prices, to surprisingly good performance both in speed and benchmarks. We have a lot to look into here. So if you're a developer, definitely watch this one through. That said, someone's got to pay these inference bills, so a quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. Hiring engineers is hard. Hiring great ones is basically impossible. And trying to find them when you're in a small city somewhere in the middle of nowhere, good luck, have fun. What if it was easy though? What if you could just scroll through a bunch of options, watch videos from those candidates, and click hire on the one you want? And what if it only took a week to do? This sounds impossible, but G2I is here to make the impossible happen. These guys are awesome. I've loved them forever. They're the hosts of React Miami, which I've said for a while is the best React conference. And you know what? I'm going to stand behind that. I'll be there at end of April, by the way, if you want to hang out there. We're not here to talk about React Miami. We're here to talk about how much easier they make hiring. You write a bunch of questions that are important to you, and then they go and ask their set of over 8,000 really talented engineers those questions. And then you can scroll through the videos and watch the ones from the handful of candidates they thought were good fits for you, and then just click hire and spin them up as soon as you want them. Part-time, full-time, remote, in-person. In-person's hard if you're not in a big city like New York or SF, but the best engineers don't want to work in those cities anyways. They prefer remote. So if you want the absolute best, remote's going to be fine for you. They fight for this hard. They're a fully remote company. You got a lot of options there. What's more important is the number and quality of those engineers, which is the 8,000 engineers that they have ready to go with experience all over the industry. They know how to move fast, and it shows. They'll share a Slack channel with you and just kind of feel like part of your team, like your own personal recruiting org that is product-based, AI-driven, but also has a real human element to it. If you did want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars spinning this up yourself, it's still going to take you a year or more to get an actual hiring pipe moving, or you can hit their crazy number of 7 days from interview to first pull request landed. If you need great engineers and you don't want to waste all of your time and money spinning up your own recruiting, hit these guys up today at soydev.link/G2I. Introducing GPT 4.1 in the API. A new series of GPT models featuring major improvements on coding, instruction following, and long context, plus our first ever nano model. This is a particularly interesting play on their part. Seems like they saw what Google was up to with Gemini and realized they were losing some ground, and now they're fighting hard. 3 new models are 4.1, 4.1 mini, and 4.1 nano. Believe it or not, you might have played with 4.1 already because they were released in stealth with OpenRouter. The Keysar Alpha and Optimus Alpha models were both runs of 4.1. So it's a model a lot of people have played with and have been impressed with the performance of. I honestly thought that those anonymous models were going to be the new open models from OpenAI, but I'm more than happy with these because I'm seeing some really cool stuff. 4.1 is doing really well on the SWE bench, which was a benchmark they published a few months ago that really confused me because it kind of made them look bad against Claude, but it seems like this was their play and their plan all along because now they look a lot less bad. Okay, so I'm pretty sure this was the score for 4.0 on this benchmark, 23.2%. That was end of last year. And for comparison with Claude 3.5, okay, 49% is what they had. Previous state of the art was for 45%. This was beginning of the year. They hit 49%. I don't know if 3.7 did better. Interesting. Without the scaffold, Sonnet achieved 63.7% with 3.7, comparing to an admittedly much lower score in 4.1 here, a 54.6. But if we are comparing to everyone's favorite, Claude 3.5, those numbers are within a spitting distance. Sorry for the chaos. I tried to find those numbers. I thought they'd be more accessible than they are. But yeah, I'm personally waiting for artificial analysis's numbers to be dropped because this is the site I use for tracking all of these things. It's made my life significantly easier. And it's always hard filming these videos when 4.1 or whatever new model exists isn't yet in the UI. It's really, really nice to compare things once they all exist. But I've already built my own tools instead because I want to make sure we can see how these things actually affect space. As you can see, 4.1 is quite a bit cheaper than 4.0, which makes it quite a bit cheaper than 3.5, but we'll get to the exact pricing numbers in a sec. We need to finish this post first. I don't even know if I cover this part. 1 million token context windows. That's the same size as Gemini. If you're not familiar with what that means, it's the amount of data that you can hand the model and generate a response from. This isn't something like RAG where you can look up things within data. This is more the amount of text that can be in the chat history that's being auto-completed. There have been a lot of crazy solutions in order for your LLMs to be able to ask for access to a file and then get the metadata from it and then make a decision. With 1 million tokens, each token being 4 to 8 characters, most code bases will comfortably fit in that window. And it's been a lot of fun using models like Gemini to just dump a ton of data, ask it to do something, and it can because it has all of the context right there. OpenAI's models have historically been limited at around 100,000 tokens. So this is a 10x jump, which is huge and fundamentally changes the things you can do with these models. But it's also part of why they're only in the API, because you shouldn't be pasting millions of tokens into a chat UI. I have a gripe with a lot of our users. Since these models are API only, if you do want to try them, you should check out T3 Chat. We're currently offering 4.1 Mini and Nano for free without having a paid subscription. And 4.1 is part of our $8 a month tier. Yes, $8 a month for access to all of these models, 1,500 messages a month with any of them other than the 2 expensive ones, which are Claude and Grok 3. Everything else isn't premium. Those 2, you'll get 150 messages a month. You get the idea. We've shilled T3 Chat enough. To celebrate the drop, I want to give out some free T3 Chat, so use the code 4.1 with dashes spelled out all caps when you check out for 1 month free. And don't do this if you're already a subscriber. If you cancel and resub, it won't work and just makes our numbers look bad. So it's only for new subs. Sorry. But if you haven't subbed yet, T3.chat, I think you'll be impressed. If you don't like it, you can just cancel. It's free anyways. We'll do that for the first 300 people who use the code. So if you get an error, I'm sorry. 300 people redeemed it ahead of you. We'll be back to actually test the models here in just a moment. 4.1 did really well on these other challenges too. It was like a 30% bump on the scale multi-challenge, which checks a bunch of different things. And it also killed it with the video context understanding benchmark, which is really useful, being able to parse a long video and find specific things in it. It's going to be a really powerful use case. I'm excited to see what people do with it. This is the chart that is most interesting. And not just because they screwed up when they first posted it. Let me find proof of that here. Originally, they put 4.0 Mini as the label in both places, which is pretty funny. They've since addressed it and fixed it. So now it says 4.0, like it always should have. Just thought that was funny. This puts 4.1 in an interesting spot. I would already personally consider 4.0 Mini to be like the lower tier of what I would accept for quality. So having something stupider than 4.0 Mini isn't particularly attractive to me. But having a model that is as cheap as it is very interesting, especially coming from OpenAI. This is my work browser. Sorry for the browser change. I want to go through all the prices quick in order to contextualize. So 4.1 is $2 per million tokens in and $8 per million tokens out, putting it a little bit cheaper than something like 4.0 while performing seemingly outright better. Really, really cool. It can't generate images or audio yet, but it can take in an image, which is very handy. What's more interesting here isn't the price of 4.1 though, although that is very interesting. It's 4.1 Mini, which is slightly more expensive than 4.0 Mini was, and 4.1 Nano, which is by far the cheapest model OpenAI has ever released. We use this little site I just built for checking model prices, modelprices.versell.app, by the way, if you're curious. Here we can see how these cheaper models all compare in price. You'll see that 4.1 Mini is a decent bit more expensive than 4.0 Mini, where 4.0 Mini was 15 cents in, 60 cents out. 4.1 Mini's 40 cents in, $1.60 out. So for a mini model, that's somewhat expensive, depending on what you think a mini model is, because 03 Mini is still the best model out there. It's technically a mini model, but it's not that expensive compared to a lot of these things, and it's still really, really good. Look, it's literally just barely higher here, but it's the best model ever made, and everything above this, for the most part, isn't really worth it unless you're doing specific stuff. So back to these prices, though, because Nano is priced identically to Gemini 2.0 Flash. Very, very interesting, because as you guys probably know by now, Flash is one of my favorite models. The price to performance there is insane. And if we trust how OpenAI described the performance characteristics compared to their own models in that chart, because again, we don't have many third-party verified benchmarks just yet. I'm quite confused about 4.1 Nano, simply because it's clear they're trying to make this a model that competes with 2.0 Flash. But 2.0 Flash is very smart, like smarter than V3. And if I add in the things that are going to ruin how this chart looks, the new 4.0 is quite a bit smarter, but still not that much more so in general than Gemini 2.0 Flash is. 4.0 is 50 points on this arbitrary average index that they make on artificial analysis, and Flash is 48.09. So they're in like spitting distance of each other, even though 4.0 is like 30x the price. 4.0 Mini is quite a bit stupider. If 4.1 Nano was smarter than 4.0 Mini, then it would make a lot of sense to compete with Flash. But right now, I would say of the new models, that's the one I wouldn't bother touching, because even in their own diagrams, let me find it again quick. Here, They said 4.1 nano with a fancy Apple-style chart with no labels. They said 4.1 nano is dumber than 4.0 mini. So it's exactly as expensive as Flash, but it's dumber than 4.0 mini, which makes it way dumber than Gemini 2.0 Flash. I don't think Nano has a use case right now other than theoretically latency, but even there, it's kind of struggling. I use OpenRouter to compare latency numbers because they're using real production traffic and averaging it. Nano's latency is about 0.43 seconds, so it takes about that long before you start getting tokens back, and 136 to 137 tokens per second, compared to Gemini 2.0 Flash, not even the light version, just standard 2.0 Flash. Latency's within a spitting distance, throughput's higher. I don't get it. I'm confused what the role of this model is. It's not like it can output more stuff than they can with Flash. That seems to be about it, though. Yeah, this is why I'm getting confused. If we go back to my pricing chart, this is what I made that website on, by the way. So here we see 2.0 Flash, 10 cents in, 40 cents out. 4.1 Nano, which is dumber, 10 cents in, 40 cents out. Flashlight is still the GOAT for its price, but again, it's so close to 2.0 Flash, hard for me to justify touching light. So I'm a bit confused about these Mini and Nano models. Mini makes sense. The price increase feels a bit weird. The only reason I would ever use 4.1 Mini instead of something else is if I really don't want reasoning and I want fast responses with access to the tools and things that OpenAI integrates with better. That's actually one of the important things that we need to talk about as we cover this, because there's a lot of things that models can be good and bad at. So obviously, one of the things that makes models good is their general intelligence. I would argue you could break this into multiple categories. There is knowledge. So how much stuff does it have that it trained against? This is what made 4.5 so smart, so to speak, is that it was trained on an insane amount of data, so it knows more about the world than almost any model before it did. That doesn't mean it's good enough, though. And the intelligence isn't just how much data does it have, but how well can it apply things. So once we have the data model trained on, then we have the capabilities of that model. This would be stuff like reasoning, for example, allows the model to make smarter decisions based on the data that it has, but it doesn't know things it doesn't know. So like, when was the data cut off? If you ask it who won the Super Bowl in 2024, but it was only trained for 2023, it doesn't matter how good its reasoning is. It might be able to guess who won better, but a model that has more data will be more likely to answer the question correct, especially if the data is more up to date. You can't beat not having the data, but once you have the data, how smart can you be with it? 4.1 does not have as much data as 4.5 or anywhere near it. It is a more recent cutoff, and it doesn't have reasoning. So everything they've done in the general intelligence camp, so to speak, is just improvements in their inference layer, improvements in how they're building things and doing things. That million context window suggests they're doing things very differently with this model. So I'm excited to see what that looks like long term. So general intelligence. Then we have domain specific intelligence. This is things like, how good is it at science? How good is it at math? How good is it at code? 4.1 is a huge leap in a handful of those, specifically math and more importantly, code. OpenAI has historically struggled with both of those categories. When I have a really hard technical problem to solve, O3 Mini can help me through it and think through these difficult things. But beyond those hard problems, it's not particularly great to work with. The combination of the reasoning, meaning you don't get an answer for quite a bit, as well as the lack of day-to-day knowledge with code, I feel like it has. Like, it's not going to be a good autocomplete or tab complete experience. It's not going to be as good at building UIs quickly. But if I have a really weird scroll container problem or some weird database management stuff I want help with, or I'm just talking with it about different architecture stuff, I found O3 Mini to be really, really good. But when it comes to just solving code in the day-to-day, not so much so. The winners historically for code been Claude, and not just Claude, the 3.5 re-release that happened late last year, that's 3.6 that we've since coined it. 3.5 has historically been the winner here. Anthropic's working super, super hard to win in code, and they have succeeded thus far. It's one of the reasons they can charge their premium, but there's one other reason they can charge their premium. This is one of the most important pieces I want to emphasize here. Tool calling. Tool calls are, at this point, essential to a model being smart. Tools are the general term for things we give the AI access to, and we do that by having certain text it can spit out that we will then process and do something with code with. An example of this would be checking the weather. So a user could ask, how should I dress today? And the AI would be able to call a tool that you built that will go check the weather in your area, get back a response, and then use that response as it generates its answer. Tool calls are huge, especially for things like giant code bases, because if you need to access certain files, you might need to find all files that reference this variable. And if you have a tool, like you would in something like Cursor, that allows the AI to ask where all the files that are relevant are, it will provide those files, and then it can do things to them. It has tools for updating files, it has tools for changing variables, tools for checking types, tools for reading errors, tools for all these types of things. The reason I bring this up is there's been one model that has dominated with tool calls. Claude 1 Hard. Claude is the undisputed king of tool calling, and I would go as far as to say it's the reason they can justify their premium. If they weren't so far ahead with how good Claude is with tools, they would not be able to justify their price at all, and they would have already lost. But because Claude is good at tools and also is trained well on code, Anthropic's been leaning really, really hard in this developer-focused direction. Things like Claude Code is a great example of them really leaning into developers. 4.1 is OpenAI fighting back. Because in these particular places, in code knowledge and math knowledge too, but more importantly, tool calling, 4.1 is killing it. One other note on tool calls before we go any further is that reasoning seems to hurt here. Reasoning makes a model more likely to generate the right answer, but reasoning also has an interesting side effect where it will talk more to itself and create more information and convince itself of things that might not be true. And the result is that it might go rogue with these tool calls. And I've seen a lot of instances where a reasoning model like 3.7 reasoning just does dozens of tool calls for basic stuff because it has them and it will check everything constantly. So giving a reasoning model access to tools does not always mean you'll get good answers. As such, a lot of developers, myself included, tend to lean towards non-reasoning models when we're using tools, such as Cursor. So in Cursor, I only use O3 Mini when I'm solving a specific hard problem in a file. When I want to update a variable or change how a function is being used, I still use 3.5 or other similar models. There is one other model that's been winning really hard here recently, though. Gemini 2.5 Pro. I'd go as far as to say 2.5 Pro was the first model to prove that Claude's dominance on code knowledge could actually be beaten out. 2.5 is as good, if not better, at general code stuff. And it's a meaningful improvement in tool calling on Google's side too. It's still not as good as Claude is at choosing when to call what tools and using the data that gets back, but it has improved a ton, and it makes it a viable option in your IDE. I know a ton of people who have moved over to Gemini. I've been planning on doing it myself, but I've been too busy to code a lot, sadly. I very much plan to have my next couple months of dev be on 2.5 Pro and ChatGPT 4.1, unless, of course, new models come out. One more fun call out. They say 4.1 is roughly as good as 4.0 while being 83% cheaper. Very cool to see. Here we are, the code section. 4.1 is a massive jump in code, even performing better than O3 Mini. Again, a lot of that's probably going to be tool calls and not reasoning yourself into gaslighting. But damn, it's performing really, really well on these benchmarks. And it was not before. Now it's in a spitting distance of Claude's best. For API devs looking to edit large files, 4.1 is much more reliable at code diffs across a range of formats. Huge deal. Again, for building this into your editors. All of the AI IDEs have been quick to jump on 4.1, part of why I've been starting to play with it. It's really, really good for this stuff. They specifically trained 4.1 to follow diff formats more reliably, which allows devs to save both cost and latency by only having the model output change lines rather than rewriting an entire file. This is huge if you're trying to build your own AI dev tools, or you're trying to build something like artifacts with GPT 4.1. Now you don't have to regenerate the whole file and apply it in the editor. You can just get the diff and apply it the way you would with any other diff in Git. That's super, super cool to see. That said, they did double the limit for how many tokens can be output in one call, which is a huge change too. Funny enough, the diffing actually made it more accurate overall. When almost every other model they've tested, the diffs perform worse. So it's clear it's actually very good at that. Because of that, you're going to be generating way less tokens and you're going to be spending way less money, which is a huge win. They showcased an example here where they made the same app with both, and it's definitely made a much nicer looking experience here. Like, can handle different fonts totally fine. It has really fancy animations as you fly around in it. Looks pretty good overall. This was the original with 4.0. It still has a fancy-ish animation, but the UI is significantly worse. Click zones are wrong. It doesn't have the sidebar. It's messier. And that's been my experience trying to do code stuff with 4.0. It's just not very good at it. 4.1 seems significantly better. Also seems to have handled the multi-language requests more. It's a good prompt. I like this test. But these are just fun tests. And believe me, there are plenty more of those. My personal favorite will always be the hexagon test. I know it's not great, but it is fun. And 4.1 handled it pretty well. I'm impressed. Surprised that it can make such good physics for that. One interesting detail is that Flavio, the guy who made up this test, is a really big fan of 4.5, which I haven't heard many people say. Particularly sad to see because they mentioned 4.5 in here. 4.5 is now being deprecated because they need more GPUs. At least that's what they said during the announcement. But 4.5 preview will be removed from the API in the near future in order to give access to all these other things and have enough infra for it. We have until July 2025 in order to make that transition. Very fun. 4.5 is so expensive, I don't think many were using it. I'm sure that they're confidently adding this because the numbers show otherwise. So as I was saying, those were all fun, goofy benchmarks. They don't show what real life use is like, though. You know what does? Editors. Seems like they're working closely with Windsurf, probably because Claude is working closely with Cursor. Makes sense they're trying to build friends in the other side. I get it. I know how these corporate politics work. But Windsurf got early access, and they said that 4.1 scores 60% higher than 4.0 does on Windsurf's internal code benchmark, which correlates strongly with how often code changes are actually accepted on the first review. Users noted that it was 30% more efficient in tool calls and 50% less likely to repeat unnecessary edits or read code in overly narrow, incremental steps. Huge win there. That makes this go from unusable to real competition for Claude. Quoto also ran a test across 200 real-world PRs with the same prompts and conditions. 4.1 produced a better suggestion in 55% of cases. I want to see 55% of cases, like, compared to what? Oh, this is comparing to 3.7. Fun. So it's winning over half, but it's like neck and neck now with 3.7. I am curious how 3.5 would have performed here, though. But this benchmark being included and them not saying Claude here is what it's performing in 55% of cases shows that they are very clearly trying to respond to Anthropic here without saying the word Anthropic here. It's a very interesting position they're in. So that's the code performance. I want to cover the tooling stuff because, again, I think this will be the bigger overall win, and it's a huge part of why it's only in the API, because this model isn't anywhere near as beneficial in a chat UI unless you're chatting about code exclusively. But this doesn't make sense as the default model on ChatGPT's website, especially when 4.0 has all these fancy features like image gen, audio gen, and all of the other stuff people are looking for. Instructions, however, you'll never need to deal with in the chat app. You will need to deal with them in your editor. And this is available via API, so they could be integrated in tools like T3 Chat, like Windsurf, like Cursor, etc. Part of why is tool calls, which aren't just useful for editors, by the way. They're useful for any AI app you're building that does different things that require infrastructure. 4.1 follows instructions more reliably, and we've measured significant improvements across a variety of instruction following evaluations. We developed an internal eval for instruction following to track model performance across a number of dimensions and in several key categories of instruction following, including the following. Format following. Provide instructions that specify a custom format for the model's response, like XML, YAML, Markdown, etc. So if you are using XML as the format that your tool will get from the AI to go do something with, it will follow the format of XML much better now. Another huge change, they were very excited to mention this during the live stream, negative instructions. You can now specify a behavior the model should avoid, like don't ask them to contact support, don't ever use this function, don't import from here, those types of things. Sometimes it honestly felt like telling a model not to do something made it more likely to do it because now it knows about the thing because it's in that context. Now it follows negative instructions significantly better. Also follows order instructions better, like when you tell it to do 1, then 2, then 3, better at that. Context requirements, another huge deal, such as always include the amount of protein when writing a nutrition plan. This is very useful to be able to tell the model what to output and know it's more likely to include that information. Ranking's a big deal. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an AI to spit out a list and it was out of order. And overconfidence. Now the model is instructed to say, I don't know, or similar, if requested information isn't available, or the request doesn't fall into a given category. Example, if you don't know the answer, provide the support contact email. Huge. So if you're building like bots into your website for people to ask support questions, stuff like that, these are all huge wins if you're building real software with AI and not just a chat app. That said, we are building a chat app and it's been really, really nice for this too. Solve Advent of Code 2021, Day 3 in Python. Runs fast as ever. I'm surprised at the performance. OpenAI's models historically haven't been super fast, and it seems like they've felt insulted by that and are fixing it now. Nothing too weird with the formatting. They really like the line breaks, I've noticed, more than any of the other OpenAI models, and some of them already had a strong preference there. It's good. Haven't used enough to have a vibe for it just yet, so I can't say how fun it is to talk to. But all the code stuff I've thrown at it so far, it's handled really well. So they say they've made the model better at all these things. Do we have measurements? Yes. Here's their internal instruction following evaluation. Funny enough, O3 Mini was actually pretty good at following instructions despite being a reasoning model. 4.1, significant improvement compared to 4.0. 4.0 was not good at following instructions. 4.1 is as good as some reasoning models and some expensive as hell models too. 4.1 Nano and Mini, less so. Mini is better than I would have expected. Nano, I don't like the Nano model. I could end up being wrong on that, but I'm not feeling good vibes with it at the moment. Multi-turn instruction following is critical for many devs. It's important for the model to maintain coherence deep in a conversation and keep track of what the user told it earlier. We train 4.1 to be better able to pick out information from past messages in the conversation, allowing for more natural conversations. The multi-challenge benchmark from Scale is a useful measure of the capability. 4.1 performs 10.5% better than 4.0. Yeah, nice improvement. But again, not groundbreaking for them in any way. When you saw how much better 4.1 was than even 0.3 in some places, it's cool to see an improvement for a non-reasoning model, but not huge yet. Here are some actual real-world examples from real companies, by the way. 4.1 was 53% more accurate than 4.0 on their internal benchmark at BlueJay, which is tax AI. Cool. Jump in accuracy, key to both system performance and user satisfaction, highlights 4.1's improved comprehension of complex regulations and its ability to follow nuanced instructions over long contexts. Imagine if we spent all this time fixing America's tax system instead of building AI to figure it out for us. Taxes here suck. I have a lot of paperwork to file after the stream. Anyways, Hex, which is SQL something. End-to-end quick queries, deep dive analysis. Okay, workspace for SQL. Seems cool. They had a 2x improvement on their most challenging SQL evaluation set, showcasing significant gains in instruction following and semantic understanding. Huge. Again, if you're building things that do tool calls and follow instructions, it seems like the model is way better. Speaking of access to lots of things, long context, the biggest change of all of what's here. OpenAI's never meaningfully bumped their context window to this level before. A 10x increase is huge, from 128K to 1 million in. Funny enough, look, I actually belong here for once. React. 1 million tokens is 8 copies of the entire React codebase. The long context is a great fit for processing large code bases or lots of long docs. That said, the problem with these larger context windows isn't just how well can it support having all of them. The bigger deal and the issue I've seen a lot is that once you have all that context, you end up with a needle in the haystack problem, where there's so much data, it can sometimes struggle to find the one specific thing in it. They did a lot of tests to make sure they could handle the needle in a haystack problem, and the results are pretty promising. This was fun. This is a weird looking chart because all of the models that they just put out could retrieve the needle in the haystack, regardless of the context window. So there's no dip in accuracy. It's 100% across everything. Kind of nuts. But as they say, few real-world tasks are as straightforward as finding a single obvious needle amongst a bunch of stuff here. They also, to test this, open sourced yet another eval, the OpenAI MRCR, Multi-Round Conference. Interesting name. This eval's goal is testing the model's ability to find and disambiguate between multiple needles in a well-hidden context. So lots of weird things deep within a giant pile of text. An example here is write a poem about tapirs or write a blog post about rocks. They'll insert 8 identical requests throughout the context. The model must then retrieve the response corresponding to a specific instance, like give me the 3rd poem about tapirs. This is particularly challenging because of the similarity in the requests, so the needle looks a lot more like a piece of hay. And the results are pretty nuts. They still aren't showing compared to other models. I'd be very curious to see how this runs against Gemini. I haven't had a chance to run the benchmark to figure it out myself. What you'll see here is with 4.1, as the context gets huge, it still maintains over 50% accuracy. Obviously, anything less than 100 when you're programming systems with this isn't great, but the fact that this improvement is as significant as it is, first off, that within the smaller context that other models could do, it's already way better than much bigger and fancier models. It's more expensive too. Like O1 and O3 perform quite a bit worse here, even in the small context. And as the context is bigger, they don't perform because they can't actually do anything there. Praying us to see an over 50% success rate for such a weird challenge up to 1 million tokens. But also we could see once again, 4.1 Nano doesn't seem like a good model. I'm still very confused about that one. Oh, they also put out a data set to use for training for these things and testing as well. That's pretty cool. GraphWalk's breadth first search test scored really well too. Not as good as 4.5, but surprisingly well. And again, real world examples. Reuters used it for legal work. They were able to improve multi-document review by 17%. Interesting. Not as big a jump as I would have expected there. In particular, they found the model to be highly reliable at maintaining context across sources and accurately identifying nuanced relationships between documents, such as conflicting clauses or additional supplementary context, tasks critical to legal analysis and decision making. Carlyle uses 4.1 to accurately extract granular financial data across multiple lengthy documents. They said it's 50% better on retrieval for very large docs with dense data. What are they comparing to? I should check for both of these what they're comparing to. Okay, it looks like 3.7 was performing comparable to 4.0 for Reuters at the very least, but they don't have any tests with Gemini. Very interesting. And Carlyle doesn't even have a source. It's just a link to their homepage. That's great. I just wanted to see how this compares to Gemini. Vision seems pretty good. Cool to see. OpenAI has always been pretty good at that. That said, Gemini is really good at image stuff, probably simply because Google has a ton of images with the Google image platform and Google Photos and whatnot. I still remember the look on my mom's face when I showed her she could search for a person in Google Photos and their baby photos would come up because it could still tell. Google's good at that. Pricing's also interesting because they've made caching the prompts way better. For queries that repeatedly pass the same context, we're increasing the prompt caching discount to 75% for these new models. So if you're like loading a huge code base and prompting against it constantly, you can cache most of the code and not have to reevaluate that and pay the higher costs. Yeah, the cache input is a fourth the price. Huge deal. 4.1 is a significant step forward in the practical application of AI. By focusing closely on real-world developer needs, ranging from coding to instruction following and long context understanding, these models unlock new possibilities for building intelligent systems and sophisticated agentic applications. That is fair. And I will say from my experience working with ChatGPT and OpenAI, they care a lot about devs, and it seems like the success that other competing companies are having in the developer space has them working extra hard. From the effort they're putting into building some really good open models, more on that coming soon, to what they did here. Like, how crazy is it for a company like OpenAI, that's main product is their app, to put out a groundbreaking LLM exclusively in the API? It almost feels like they're throwing a freebie to me over at T3 Chat, because now, for each and every one of you that wants to try the latest model, the easiest way to do it is actually objectively T3 Chat, which is kind of nuts. So yeah, if you want to try this out for code, try it out here. Play with it in your editors too. Almost all of them are going to support it. If they don't already, they will very soon. Let me know what you guys think. And until next time, keep prompting.